I, a solitary rancher in Montana, open my door to two lost Shoshone women, and my life transforms forever. You'll witness how empathy blossoms into love on the rugged frontier. Don't miss this heartwarming saga of bravery, compassion, and new beginnings. Please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of frontier romance. It was a bitter, frost-nipped evening on the edge of Montana, the kind of night when the plains fell quiet under a heavy, slate-colored sky. Elias Holt sat by his cast-iron stove, gazing at the dance of flames that had been his only companion for years. The groan of the old cabin's timbers was the only sound he knew now. Ever since his wife, Leela, passed away, the nights felt endless, stretched thin by memories and loneliness. He'd grown accustomed to it, the stillness, the pang, the long talks with silence itself. But that evening was different. A soft knock cut through the wind's howl. Elias hesitated, almost fearful. He froze, wondering if his mind was playing tricks again. Another knock came, faint but urgent. Whoever it was, they were in need. He grabbed his lantern, unlatched the sturdy door, and found two figures standing in the snow. Two young Shoshone women, trembling and barefoot. For a long moment, no one spoke. The wind roared through the open doorway, tugging at Elias's jacket as if nudging him to act. The women's eyes flicked toward him, pleading, wary and heavy with fatigue. Their garments were tattered, their hands raw from the cold. Elias's chest tightened at the sight. He knew the risks. The nearby town of Willow Bend wasn't welcoming to strangers, especially not natives. Sheltering them could spell trouble, maybe worse. But he also saw something deeper in their faces: pride, resilience, and a quiet will to endure. "Come inside," he said at last, stepping back. They paused before crossing the threshold, unsure of his motives. The cabin's warmth wrapped around them, and one of the women let out a faint gasp, her breath shaky as she reached for the fire. Elias offered them each a quilt, his calloused hands careful not to alarm them. He didn't ask questions right away. Instead, he watched them taw by the hearth, their shoulders easing as the fears started to slip from their expressions. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe to keep these frontier tales coming. Where are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know. The younger one looked barely 20. Her hair was long and matted, her eyes keen despite her weariness. The older one had a steady presence, almost guarding the other. When Elias brought them bread and soup, they exchanged a glance before nodding politely. "Thank you," the younger one murmured, her English halting but heartfelt. Her name, she later shared, was Sonny. The other, more guarded, was Kiona. They'd been traveling for days after fleeing their camp, driven out by soldiers who razed their village to ash. Elias listened quietly, his heart heavy as they spoke. He'd seen cruelty before, men who called themselves just while stripping others of everything. He couldn't turn them away. As the blizzard outside raged harder, the three of them sat near the hearth. The fire popped, casting a warm glow across their faces. Elias found himself watching them, the way Sonny's hands shook as she held her mug, the sorrow in Kiona's eyes as she stared into the flames. It had been years since he'd shared his home with anyone, and suddenly the cabin felt alive again. He thought of Leela, how she used to hum softly while darning socks or stirring broth. For the first time since her death, the silence in his chest shifted, not gone, but gentler somehow. He didn't know these women's full story, and maybe he never would, but he knew enough. They needed shelter, and he had it. "You can stay tonight," he told them. "The storm won't ease till morning." They shared a look, a wordless exchange passing between them before Sonny nodded. "We leave tomorrow," she said cautiously. Elias nodded back, though something in him hoped they wouldn't. He stood, tossed another log on the fire, and glanced at the window where snow battered the panes. The women huddled under their quilts, murmuring in their native tongue, their voices soft and rhythmic, like a song carried on the breeze. Elias lay awake long after, listening. Every sound, the storm, the fire, the quiet breaths of his unexpected guests, wove into something oddly comforting. The loneliness that had clung to him so fiercely began to loosen its hold. He thought about what tomorrow might bring. If Willow Bend caught wind of this, gossip would spread fast. He could lose business, maybe face hostility from folks who thought the frontier was theirs alone. But looking at the two women asleep by the fire, he knew none of that mattered tonight. They were human, cold, and scared, and that was reason enough to help. As dawn crept in, the storm began to calm. Pale light spilled across the snow, seeping through the cabin's cracked walls. Elias sat up, feeling the quiet weight of morning settle in. The women stirred, and Sawney looked at him with eyes that still held fear, but also a spark of trust. When she whispered, "Thank you," her voice quivered, not just with gratitude, but with disbelief that kindness still existed in this harsh land. Elias managed a small smile. "You're safe here," he said simply. Outside, the storm clouds parted, revealing a faint blue sky stretching endlessly over the Montana plains. Inside, the cabin no longer felt like a grave of memories. It felt like a home again. In that tender morning light, Elias realized something he hadn't in years. Sometimes life offers second chances, not through wonders, but through the unexpected knock of a stranger at your door. Yo, if this tale's tugging at your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more Frontier Tales. Where are you tuning in from? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to know. The winter snows melted slowly into spring, painting the plains around Elias Holt's ranch in soft hues of green and amber. What had once been a barren stretch of land now echoed with laughter, music, and the clink of tools. Sawney and Kiona had stayed longer than they'd first intended, their presence weaving quietly into the rhythm of Elias's days. They worked alongside him from sunrise to dusk, learning the cadence of sowing and reaping, tending the livestock, and repairing the weathered fences worn by wind and time. Elias, who had once spoken only to the breeze, found himself talking again, explaining, teaching, even chuckling. There was something restorative about the way they moved through his world, as if life itself had stepped back into his cabin with a softer face. Sawney had a way of making even mundane tasks feel almost sacred. She sang quietly as she worked, melodies that carried an ancient depth, yet felt lighter than air. Elias often paused to listen, his heart easing with every note. Her songs told of rivers and peaks, of people who once lived unbound beneath vast skies. It reminded him that this land held more than his own memories. It held the echoes of countless others.
Kiona, quieter but steadfast, took to the animals with a natural grace, soothing the horses and coaxing the stubborn donkey into compliance with just a few murmured words. Their bond with the land reminded Elias of his late wife, Leela, who used to say that compassion was the best seed a rancher could sow, but the peace they built together didn't go unnoticed. When Elias rode to Willow Bend for supplies, he started hearing whispers. The storekeeper's tone was colder than usual, and talk hushed when he walked in. "You've got guests up there, Holt," one man finally said. "Two Shoshone women, ain't it?" The words carried a sting of accusation. Another muttered, "You'll bring trouble on us all if you don't send them off." Elias stood silent, jaw clenched, as the eyes around him brimmed with judgment. He paid for his goods and left without a word. On the ride home, the open fields that once felt like freedom now seemed heavy with unspoken threats. He knew how folks could turn cruel when fear took root. Yet, as his cabin came into view, smoke curling gently from the chimney, he felt a pull stronger than fear. Belonging. That evening, he found Sawney and Kiona working side by side, mending the corral fence before dusk. The light turned everything golden, the horizon stretching like a vow. Elias dismounted and watched them quietly. Sawney's laughter drifted through the air, soft and genuine. For a moment, he forgot the world beyond his land, the murmurs, the warnings, the prejudice that ran deep in men's hearts. All he saw was peace. He walked over, handed them water, and said simply, "You're part of this place now." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Sawney blinked, unsure how to reply, then smiled shyly, a smile that said more than words ever could. As the weeks passed, Elias noticed a change in himself. He rose before dawn, not out of routine, but with purpose. He found himself building new things: a second shed, a bigger garden, a sense of life he'd thought buried with Leela. The women worked tirelessly, never asking for more than a place to rest and a little kindness in return. One evening, as Saini sang by the fire, Elias picked up his old banjo for the first time in years. The instrument had gathered dust since Leela's death, but that night, the music returned to him. Saini listened, her eyes mirroring the flicker of the flames. When he stopped, she said softly, "You play from the soul." Elias nodded. "That's the only way worth playing." But soon, the town's resentment began to simmer stronger. A letter arrived, unsigned, warning him to send them back where they belonged. Someone carved a crude mark on his gate one night, a message clear as day. Elias burned the letter and fixed the gate at sunrise, his anger simmering beneath a calm resolve. When Saini saw it, she asked, "They hate us?" Elias paused. "They don't know you, and people fear what they don't know." She looked down, her eyes glistening. "You not afraid?" He smiled faintly. "Not anymore." In that moment, something passed between them, a trust deeper than words, born of shared solitude and quiet courage. Summer swept in, turning the plains warm and golden. The small ranch began to thrive, crops grew tall, animals flourished, and laughter filled the air. Elias stopped counting the days. They blended into one another, each carrying the same quiet joy. He taught Saini to ride, her laughter ringing across the open fields as she learned to balance on the old bay mare. Kiona, ever vigilant, would tease them both, her rare smiles brightening the dullest days. Sometimes, as they shared supper by lamplight, Elias would catch himself thinking, this was how life was meant to be, not grand or loud, but gentle, shared, and full of meaning. Then one evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Elias made his choice. The world outside might never accept what they'd built, but this small patch of land was his, and he wouldn't let hate shape its future. He stood beside the women as the sky burned crimson and said, "This land was built on compassion, and compassion stays." The words hung in the air, solid as stone. Saini's eyes welled with tears. Kiona placed her hand over his, saying softly, "Then compassion will grow here." They wept quietly, the three of them standing beneath the boundless sky, the wind carrying away every trace of fear that once lingered. That night, Elias sat alone on the porch, gazing out over his fields. The stars gleamed above like distant lanterns. The land was silent, except for the whisper of grass. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. The ache that had haunted him since Leela's death had become something different, something alive. He realized love wasn't always a bold, sudden thing. Sometimes it arrived softly, disguised as gratitude, as laughter, as the warmth of two strangers who chose to stay. It didn't erase the past, but it softened it, healed it in ways words never could. By the time autumn arrived, Elias's ranch had changed beyond recognition. So had he. He no longer thought of the women as guests. They were family now, woven into the rhythm of his days and the beating of his heart. When travelers passed by, they saw three figures working the land together. One man, two women, moving in harmony with the world around them. And though the prairie winds still carried murmurs from town, none of them mattered anymore. In the quiet of that vast land, Elias had found what he'd lost long ago: a home, a purpose, and a heart that remembered how to love. Wow, what a journey. If this story moved you, give this video some hype. Like, share, and subscribe to spread the love. Let's keep these frontier tales alive. Where are y'all watching from? Drop it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.